Hello and welcome to RS Agarwal's IAS. In this video of the Daily News Express, let us discuss the important topics appearing in the Hindu newspaper dated 16th October 2020. Let us start. Well, the first news or the article is from the op-ed page of the Hindu newspaper, where the author talks about the idea of multilateralism and relates it to the aspect of the Nobel Peace Prize and also with food security issue. Well, this article caters to the topic of GS Paper 2, that is International Relations specifically. The author says that we are all experiencing a pandemic called as COVID-19, and this pandemic has come in a time when the world was moving towards protectionism. As you know, several countries are adopting protectionist policies like Brexit, America First, and so on. But due to the existence or the coming of COVID-19, the world has got together, or the countries have got together to fight this very pandemic. This wasn't the scenario before the pandemic came in. The worlds or the countries were preferring themselves. The author talks about the Nobel Peace Prize of 2020 and says the World Food Programme, which has won it, has taken the multilateral approach to fight food security. Hence, the idea of multilateralism has been mentioned here. If the World Food Programme didn't take the approach of multilateralism, it wouldn't have made an impact so that it is winning the Nobel Prize of 2020. Even when there is a multilateral approach and the situation is of the World Food Programme winning the Nobel Prize, because of the pandemic, 132 million plus people will be malnourished. Considering what is the number already that is existing, 132 million people will also be malnourished. And considering the number that already exists, 100 million people more will go to sleep hungry. Well, this is the idea that the author talks about, that if World Food Programme didn't speak about multilateralism, how could we reach in such a position? How could we be able to fight this idea of hunger or malnourishment? Then the author goes on to talk about United Nations, which is currently at the 75th year. He talks about how the role of United Nations has been diluted due to these very policies of the countries where they're moving towards protectionism. But we all know that the whole idea of creation of United Nations is to have a globalized world order where all countries would come together, discuss, and have a plan to develop themselves or develop or help in developing each other. It is obviously a multilateral institution and has a lot of relevance in today's world also, provided it is given the right kind of attention. He also goes on to talk about multilateral institutions that are present across the country or across the world. Like there is WHO, which was very helpful in fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. There is UNESCO, there is International Labour Organization, so on and so forth, which needs to be given priority, which need to be accessed properly in the right manner so that multilateralism is maintained and multilateralism is sustained as well. Globalization is an aspect that we all need to know about, that we all need to pay attention to. Globalization in today's scenario is very important, and this idea of protectionism is completely opposite to globalization. We need to prioritize a shared and a common global world order and not something that is focusing only on ourselves. If you talk about the ideas of digital economy, this idea can only grow when we have a globalized world order. This digital economy will connect several countries together and connect several ideas as well together. It leads to maximum connections, and thus technology contributes to this. Everything else also contributes to this. He also says that we face several problems today. The basic one is the idea of food security, where a lot of people are still malnourished and hungry. Then there is the idea of climate change that we are still suffering from. There is the idea of reducing biodiversity. There is the idea of reducing productivity of crops, etc. All these problems can be fought if we have a multilateral approach, and that is when these multilateral institutions like the World Food Programme, WHO, and of course the main body of all this, the UNO, becomes relevant. And he also talks about the sustainable development goals that we have set for ourselves, and if we are not able to fight against these problems with each other, if we are not able to take care of these problems in a proper manner, how will we achieve sustainable development goals that we set for itself? Well, this article becomes very relevant because there are some very interesting facts and very interesting ideas that he talks about how we are able to reach a multilateral global order, and an order where everyone is having a shared interest in a particular problem. Let's say climate change. We have the idea of climate change that we are still fighting. It's a very common problem to all of us, but then it's a very, very grave issue. And if we don't have equal contribution from all the nations, it will be very difficult for us to fight climate change. Hence, multilateralism is very important, and protectionism is not exactly the idea we need to look out for. If you hear the speech of Prime Minister Modi in UNGA, that is United Nations General Assembly, during the 75 years of the anniversary they were celebrating, Prime Minister Modi focused on a globalized world order. He said we need to have an order that is globalized in nature, that we need to have shared common interests, shared common relations with each other. I think the understanding of this is pretty simple and the explanation is done. Let us move on to the next topic. This topic is about urban floods. Now, if you have a look at the news that is there in the newspaper and also on your TV, you will see that the areas of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana are experiencing something called as urban floods. Urban floods, because I would quote the example of Hyderabad, which is the metropolitan city or one of the most grown cities in the country, is experiencing urban floods and is experiencing a time when the city is under threat because of torrential rains. Let me point out a report of 2016 by the UN, which estimated that 40 million people in India are at a risk of rising sea level by 2050. 40 million people are at risk of rising sea level by the time of 2050. Well, urban floods is little bit of different from common floods. This is not just floods as you can call them. These are urban floods because the common causes for the floods will be different and the common causes for urban floods will be different. A definition that I have found out is urban flood is an overflow of a large body of water over areas which are not usually inundated. Which are not usually inundated. This is the idea of what is an urban flood. Well, there are different regions that experience urban flood. There are coastal regions that experience urban flood. There are regions like Hyderabad, which are not on the coast but yet have many, many rivers and lakes across them, so on and so forth. This is the idea of urban flood. Now, I would like to explain to you the causes of this idea of urban floods. What causes urban floods in the country? First, let us talk about meteorological causes. Meteorological causes that cause urban flood. First is rainfall. Very simple. Torrential rains which cause heavy amount of floods. Then you have the storms, or you can say the cyclonic storms or small scale storms. Then you have temperature, which also contributes to this, or you have snowfall with regions not like Hyderabad, but then some regions that are located close to this uh, the climate where you can experience snowfall. And then you have hydrological factors. Hydrological factors include the groundwater level. If the groundwater level is very, very low, it can also contribute to it. Then you have the high tides that can contribute to this. And then you have presence or absence of overbank flow channels, that the rivers can be overflooded because of this. And then you have siltation of rivers, siltation of rivers, and such factors. These are all hydrological factors. And then you have human factors. Humans significantly contribute to this. First, you can talk about urbanization, right? You can talk about the growth of cities that has led to this. You can talk about deforestation. You can talk about obstruction of river flow due to these factors. And then you can talk about inefficient drainage system. That is, the drainage is not proper or the drainage is not sufficiently clean, so that the water that falls in cities is sunk in and the water does not stay stagnated on the surface. Then you can talk about climate change in general, which adds to this. Then you can talk about sudden release of water from the dams. When the water is suddenly released from the dams, it causes floods. And then you can talk about failure of releasing water from the dams. Failure to release water from the dams, which results in the backwater effect. This was one of the reasons why Hyderabad is experiencing such floods. Then you can talk about solid waste management, how solid waste management will not, I mean, the idea of solid waste management is very important because we need to dispose solid waste in a proper manner so that the drainages and what we call as the sewage pipes are not blocked because of this, and this leads to urban flooding where the water is not able to pass through these drainages and it stays on the surface.
You need
Here,
to update Bixby voice to continue.
here we can talk about the tagline that's given here. As floods swamp Hyderabad, the focus is on the inadequacy of drainage infrastructure. Well, in urban areas, drainage becomes very, very important. We need to have a proper drainage system so that the water can flow and it does not stagnate in the region. Next, let us understand some measures that we can use to prevent urban flooding. First, we can have an early warning system. An early warning system can be used to make sure, or latest technologies can be introduced to make sure that people are getting an idea about the kind of flood forecast. Now, do you think India does not have these? Yes, India does have them, but these are not something that people are satisfied with or not something people take very, very seriously. And then you have the idea of proper planned drainage. Now, if you listen to experts who talk about the causes of this Hyderabad floods, they say that the improper construction of the buildings, the improper construction of the system out there, and the drainage that are not planned there has caused these kind of urban floods. And this is not the first time that a city like Hyderabad has experienced floods. It has experienced it on a very, very large scale, including a cloudburst, since a very, very long time. But people have not taken it seriously. Even the government has not taken it seriously. And then you can talk about rainwater harvesting. Rainwater harvesting can be used as a technique to prevent flooding because the water can be used and stored and then reused for several other purposes. Then also you can talk about conservation of water bodies. See, Hyderabad has access to several rivers, and when it was the time of the Nizams, Hyderabad had over 200 lakes, it is said. But now the number of lakes have reduced because of the growth of urbanization, right? And due to the growth of cities, and as a result, the water retention capacity of the city in general has gone down. So if you conserve water bodies in a proper manner, and I'm not just talking about saving of lakes, we have to talk about how the lakes are saved, how the surrounding is cleaned, how they are desilted, and how we see the biological oxygen demand that is present in the lakes, so on and so forth. Most importantly, we need to have a planned urbanization. We cannot encroach the areas which are there to save us from this problem of urban floods or floods in general. We cannot encroach these places. Hence, we need to have a planned urbanization. Well, there are several strategies that the world talks about. You have the Yokohama strategy, if you've heard about it. The Yokohama strategy talks about disaster risk reduction, and Yokohama strategy talks about several guidelines that can be used to prevent floods as such. The most important problem that India faces is improper risk assessment. The floods pose some kind of risk to us, and we need to assess the risk that the floods are posing. We need to assess it, and then we need to make recommendations based on these assessments. The most important thing that we can also do is community participation. If you take an example of Bengaluru as a city, there are so many lakes in Bengaluru that are subjected to many, many environmental problems. And the local bodies like the BBMP and of course communities have taken part to conserve the lakes of Bengaluru, right? So these are the kind of things that the district authorities can undertake to make sure the problems are sorted and people are not troubled because of the idea of urban floods. I think the idea is clear. Let us move on to the next topic. Well, this is a discussion that appears in the Hindu newspaper, or like an opinion piece that appears, where Hindu predominantly tries to explain if TRPs should be regulated or not, or should the government regulate TRPs. Now, this topic caters to your GS paper 3 and GS paper 2 as well, which talks about government intervention and technological progress in the country. Now, let us see what these people are trying to tell us. and what is the idea that is being presented. I would not like to dwell deep and speak about every minute detail that the speakers in this particular piece talk about, because it's not relevant for us from the UPSC exam. I would just like to explain to you the important things that we need to understand. Now, the backdrop is that we saw something like a TRP scam that took place in the country, where TRP in general was rigged to make one channel or two channel number one. Now we saw several very popular news channels and TV anchors being involved in this TRP scam. Hence we need to know what this is. So TRP is basically television rating program. It's the amount of points that you get when the audience views your channel. That's not very important to us, but we just need to know the idea of TRP is. Now we need to understand that this TRP scam is not just lawfully wrong, but it is also ethically and morally wrong. Why? Because the audience predominantly depends on these news channels to give them the right kind of information and to be truthful to their work. So if you see, the news channels in general are the fourth pillar of democracy, or the idea of the fourth pillar of democracy, where they give us, or they hold a mirror to the society, which tells the society, okay, yes, this is how you're functioning. And if they themselves involved in something called as rigging or a scam, it becomes very wrong, because the citizenry wants to be informed in the right manner and not through any kind of scams. And if you see, the situation of media today has been constantly deteriorating because of the kind of news that they prefer to show, and they do not discuss on these important issues. Let's say the idea of urban floods itself. How many debates do we see on a daily basis on what the city in general is doing about the floods in particular, or talking about the problems like food security in particular? There is only discussion about some topics that don't even make sense. Well, this is the idea that firstly presented, that this is not just lawfully wrong but also ethically or morally wrong. Then we have the idea of BARC that comes into picture. Now I will discuss BARC in detail in the upcoming topics, but we need to know what is the meaning of TAM. Now I spoke to you what is the meaning of TRP. What is the meaning of TAM? TAM is television audience measurement, which was earlier present, which was using something called as a people's meter earlier, but this was replaced by BARC, because TAM was also subject to scams. So this means that this TRP scam is not the first ever one India has seen. India has also seen a TRP scam in the form of the TAM scam way in the year 2003 or 2004 as such. Well, what are the solutions if we need to make sure that TRPs are not rigged, and the channels coming on TV come and tell that we are the number one channel in the country, we are the number two channel in the country? How do we make sure this is regulated? What we need to know, or what we need to do with regards to this, is not to increase the sampling size. A lot of people say that if you increase the sampling size, you get a better idea, but these people who are speaking in this piece do not agree with the idea of increasing the sampling size, because it's not a solution as such. But they say that we have to regulate in a manner where there is not one agency counting the idea of TRP, but there are several agencies. We can count them together and then come for an average solution of this particular thing. Now if you see, only BRC is counting it, only BRC is giving the idea. Now this becomes the idea of cartelization. This becomes a scenario of cartelization. If these four agencies are working independently and having different idea about everything that comes into picture, we can take countings from each of these and give an average and then decide who is doing it. Now, normal people are affected ethically, normal people are affected manually. The government is affected in its own way, but the people who are most affected because of this are the advertisers or the ad companies as such. Now, these companies put money in their ads on these channels based on the TRP ratings. Now, if the TRP ratings itself is rigged, how will these advertisers trust these people? This brings me to the next idea of this particular thing. Now, the advertisers are the people who stands most hurt because of this scam, because they are spending their money on something that's not even giving them fruit, and it's a scam, it's a fraud that they're spending the money on something that is not even fruitful. Now, these people have to understand exactly what to be spoken about or what has to be done, and these people need to come up with a decision. Now, here, the speakers of this piece do not really talk about government regulation. Now, these people are not even of the opinion that government should regulate TRPs or government should regulate the content in the news channels. Because if the government starts to intervene in the fourth pillar of democracy, again, the separation of powers idea will be disrupted and the government will have control on these channels. Not just regulation of content, but also for the regulation of TRPs. If the government does it, they will have the control on TRPs and the channels will work according to the favor of the government. Hence, the people who need to decide what has to be done are the people of the industry itself. Let's say there are four channels, one, two, three, four. The first channel and the second channel are winning the race. The third and the fourth channel are losing. Now these are winning the race because of a scam. Now these are losing because of this very scam. Now because of this, all these players being the ad companies and the news channels should come together and decide the kind of regulations that need to be brought forth. And they should come up with a common consensus about how this thing has to be counted and the kind of thing that we need to be taken forward. But another opinion we see here is that the government cannot legislate on the whole concept itself, but the government can legislate on the concept of how a violation will attract some kind of penalty, will attract some kind of fees. Hence, the government has to play a proactive role and not an active role directly as such. They should make violatory, they should set violatory norms where the news channels, if they involve in some kind of violation of these norms, have to pay penalty or have to face stringent action. So this is the idea being spoken about with regards to TRPs. Well, this might not be a direct question as such, but yes, they can be asked in a twisted manner. So if we have a basic idea about what's going on in the country, I think we can tackle this mains question in a very straightforward manner. Let us move on to the next topic. This topic relates to the idea of food security and relates to GS paper 2, issues related to food and hunger. Well, if you talk about the idea of food security today is actually the World Food Day. October 16th marks the World Food Day, where we are talking about how the idea of food is spread across the world and how people are perceiving this idea of food and how it is securing their lives, securing their livelihoods, and securing their nutrition as well. Well, the author here says that the authors actually they say that the global scenario is worsening due to the pandemic. But before this pandemic, the food security was good. It was in a good position and people were doing fine. And we were in a position where we thought in a few years we will reach the optimal level, but the pandemic has worsened it. Let us forget about the global scenario. Let us jump to the Indian scenario. Now, when you talk about the Indian scenario, before the pandemic, I'm talking about pre-pandemic scenario, the situation of the food scenario was very, very good actually in India. It was making a great progress. The idea of agricultural production was growing. From a net importer, we were becoming a net exporter. The idea of this became this. We were becoming a net exporter. We were growing a lot of things in a surplus manner, be it commercial crops like fruit, vegetables, or be it cereals also. We were growing them in a proper manner. Now, if you talk about the issue that is post the pandemic, the situation has fallen, the situation has gone down a bit, but we know after the figures from the last quarter of GDP came that agriculture was the only industry that was little bit progressive compared to all the industries. Hence, we can say that the idea of food security is still one of the most important things that we are focusing on today, and India is progressing in this manner. And if India continues to do so, we will be reaching a level where we will have the ability to fight all the problems that ail or all the problems that plague the idea of food security in the country. Now, let me tell you some downsides. If you talk about the malnutrition scenario in the country, it is good to know that in the last decade, I'm talking about the last decade, that is the span of 10 years, the malnutrition has significantly declined in the country. But according to the National Nutritional Survey of 2016 to 2018, we see that 40 million children in India are still malnourished. We have a lot of gap to cover. Even then, even when we feel that we are doing a great job with food security, we have a lot of things to cover. 40 million children in India are malnourished, and half the women in India, please make a note of this, half the women in India between the age 15 to 49 are anemic. This is a very, very tough scenario to deal with, and we have to make some important steps. So this is the idea of food security. Let's go a little bit deeper. The author speaks about the idea of climate change and how it is perceived in India. This is a very big challenge in India in terms of food and agriculture. Now we see the manifestation of climate change in the form of locust attacks. Well, you saw during the lockdown there was an attack of locusts in North India and a little bit of in South India as well. Then we saw the form manifestation of climate change in the form of floods, predominantly urban floods. Then we saw the declining of groundwater levels, where we saw the Niti Aayog's Composite Water Management Index report, which said that Indian cities are going to run out of water by the time we reach 2030, 2040. Now, these are all the manifestations of climate change. Now, don't you think all these contribute to the idea of food and agriculture production in India, and also indirectly contribute to the idea of food security? Yes, they do. Then we can talk about the causes why these things happen. These things happen because several reasons. One is the excessive use of groundwater. The groundwater is being pulled out excessively, not just for agriculture, but also if you see the rising of the apartment buildings and the rising of several concepts like this, the groundwater is being pulled out. And then you have the excessive use of chemicals or fertilizers in the uh, farm fields. And then you have the idea of the loss of biodiversity as such. You know, animals are going extinct. The food web is disrupted. The plant species are going extinct, so on and so forth. Then the most important thing that the author talks about is the fragmentation of land holdings. You know, the land holdings are being divided into small pieces because of the domestic convenience of the farmers. Now, this has increased in the recent times, and 86% of the farmers in the country hold land, have land or the farmlands, and their size is below 2 hectares. Now, this is a very tough scenario because this does not contribute in any way to sustainable methods of production, or doesn't contribute in any way to the agroecological methods of production. Right? If the farmlands are divided into small pieces, then the idea of whole irrigation and the idea of providing water to those lands will become very, very tough, and there will be domestic problems that will be arising, and that is why we cannot call it sustainable method of production. And when we don't use sustainable methods of production, this happens, and this leads to this very clear idea that the author tries to give us. And this is the road we are treading to zero hunger by 2030. Another important thing that the author talks about is about how we need to stop the wastage of food. In India, one third of the food produced is wasted, not just in the farm fields, not just in the storage, but also on our folk. Now, if you see the kind of food that we consume and how we waste it, if we go to the fast food joints, if we go to the hotels and restaurants, a lot of food is getting wasted. And this definitely contributes to the idea of food security where people don't have it. Well, this is the sad part. Now, let me give you some good examples that we can have an idea about. See, there are several things that India has done. Let's say there is the Integrated Child Development Scheme, ICDS. There is Midday Meal Scheme. There is PDS. There is distribution of ration to those children who are hungry, or those children who don't have food, or pregnant or lactating mothers. These are stellar examples of how India is fighting its way to the problem of malnourishment and food security. But these problems are ailed, these steps are ailed by several problems that India has to tackle as well. Now, if you talk about how India is fighting climate change, there are several things. You can say that India has developed flood resistant or drought resistant, or drought tolerant seed varieties, right? Where the farmers are using these good seeds that help in the growth of this produce, even though they face these kind of natural challenges. Then you have the weather based agricultural forecast that will tell the farmers this is the rainy season, this is the climate, this is going to be the weather in the upcoming season, which will help the farmers beat climate change. And then you have the production of millets, which will help in dryland farming. Now, these millets don't require so much of uh, trouble or so much of tension that other kind of crops need, and they are good for the farmers, and they also give them good amounts of price. Millets promotion, this the year of millet, the decade of millet, and all these ideas are coming up. And then you have small scale irrigation that is also being promoted by the farmers or promoted by the government. Now, these are some good things, but the better thing that we need to know is how multilateral organizations that FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, IFAD, and WFP, World Food Program, are coming together to help India. Predominantly during the lockdown, they were of great help because they made sure the supply chain is well maintained and people are getting essential commodities at their disposal like food and medicines. The author also mentions a point about the food system of a country. Now, what is this idea of food system? Food system is the whole scenario from farm to fork. This includes producing, this includes sowing, harvesting, packaging, storing,
You need to update.
packaging, storing, supplying, distributing, etc. So this food system has to be well equipped, and these organizations, along with the participation of India, will help in developing the food system. Now, when the food system is developed, our road to zero hunger becomes easy, and then we can fight these problems, and India can become a nation which is self-sustained in both food production and solving the problems of malnourishment and hunger. I think the idea of this topic or this article is clear. Let us move on to the next topic. The next topic is a very simple and quite a clear topic. It is about the National Air Quality Index, which caters to GS paper 3 or your prelims examination. So the National Air Quality Index, it says the category of the air quality index has slipped to very poor in regions like Gurugram and Noida. Well, that's the news, but let's focus on the deeper aspects. The National Air Quality Index was launched in the year 2014 with the idea to give the right kind of understanding to the common man about the air quality of the country so that he can take sufficient measures. Now, this was done in some of the major urban centers. It is currently running in 10 cities like Delhi, Agra, Lucknow, Kanpur, Varanasi, Faridabad, Ahmedabad, Chennai, Bengaluru, and Hyderabad. Well, this air quality index monitors air quality on a real time basis. We have to have an idea of this. It does it on a real time basis, and it measures 8 pollutants. Now these 8 pollutants includes particulate matter 10 or particulate matter PM10, particulate matter 2.5, PM2.5, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, ozone, ammonia, and lead. What you witness here, there is no carbon dioxide and there is no methane also. Let me repeat: PM10, PM2.5, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, ozone, ammonia, and lead. Now these are the 8 pollutants that is measured in 10 cities. There are 6 categories that have been put forth. One is good, the other is satisfactory, the other is moderately polluted, the other is poor, the other is very poor, and the last is severe. 6 categories. Now if you see here, it is in very poor condition, very poor, which is in almost last stage. Let me repeat it: good, satisfactory, moderately polluted, poor, very poor, and severe. Now this air quality index is developed by CPCB, that is Center for Pollution Control Board, with the collaboration of IIT Kanpur. This also includes people who are experts in the field of medicine and air quality. And India, after the development of air quality index, has joined a league of nations, include USA, China, France, Mexico, which also have this kind of alert systems in their country. So this is a clear idea of the National Air Quality Index. Several basic facts that you can use in your answers, and also you can use to deal with a question in your prelims examination. Let us move on to the next topic. This topic is about BARC. Remember, I told you that I will tell you about it in the upcoming discussion. This caters to GS paper 2 and also your prelims. Very small discussion. Let us know how this thing works. Now, the BARC is a company created in the year 2010. This is not a government company. Okay, this is a company owned by advertisers, ad agencies, broadcasting companies, etc. Now, this is represented by the Indian Society of Advertisers, the Indian Broadcasting Foundation, and Advertising Agencies Association of India. Now you don't remember, you don't need to remember these names, but only you need to remember is that this is not a government agency, but it is jointly owned by these associations or agencies as such. Now the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting has notified the policy guidelines for television rating agencies in the year 2014, and BARC has been registered under these guidelines in 2015. Because of these guidelines and the involvement of BARC in this runs the TRP program in the country, which is the television rating program in the country, to rate how the television rating works. Alright, this is the simple idea of BARC. There are several methods of it, how it calculates. This is not relevant for UPSC exam. This is just a clear idea that you need to have. With this, let us move on to the next topic. Now this idea is about the serological survey, or this concept, which caters to GS paper 3 and also your prelims examination. The Prime Minister seeks to scale up the serological survey testing in the country. Now what is a serological survey? Let me explain to you in a very clear cut idea without giving you any bookish definition. People will come to your house, they will take samples from your body and check if your body has XYZ antibodies, and if you have these antibodies, that means you can fight this XYZ disease. Let me repeat, people will come to your house, or if you go to their place also, they will take samples from your body. They will check if your body has XYZ antibodies, and if you have these antibodies, that means you can fight this XYZ disease. Or it can also mean that your body has already fought this XYZ disease previously. Talking about the book's definition, it says that this serological survey seeks to assess the prevalence of a disease in a population by detecting the presence of certain antibodies against a certain virus. Now, this is done to diagnose infections and autoimmune illnesses. It can also be conducted in a place or in a region to check if a person has developed an immunity for this thing. So a person can eventually develop immunity. If one person has been affected by COVID-19, he can fight it. That means he's developed immunity to this disease. Let's say he's spotted in a span of 1 or 2 weeks. Let's say he might not contact it for some time. He might. We are not saying he's completely immune, but he might in the future time. But for now, he has developed some antibodies. Now these antibodies can be used to be injected in other people, so they can also develop the same and they can fight the illness. Now this survey include the ELISA test, or also called as the IgG ELISA test, that is enzyme linked immunosorbent assay test, which the test which estimates the proportion of the population exposed to the COVID-19 infection or the SARS-CoV-2 infection. The test has been approved by ICMR now for its good results. ICMR is the Indian Council for Medical Research, has approved the test. This is the idea of serological survey. You can also know the idea of herd immunity when it comes to this. Herd immunity is where there is a presence of, let's say, 100 people in general. Now these are 50 and these are 50. If these 50 people are immune to this disease of COVID-19, let's say an example, if these 50 people are immune to the disease of COVID-19 because they have certain antibodies in them, it will make sure that these people are also getting safe from this particular disease, because these people are already safe. Now we cannot be assured that all the people will be saved, but in comparison to other places where the herd immunity is very less, this region can win. Herd immunity can save lives of other people who are not very immune or not very strong when it comes to immunity. This is the idea of herd immunity or serological survey. With this, let us move on to the next topic. This is about the Eat Right movement, which is a movement started by FSSAI. FSSAI stands for Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. Food Safety and Standards Authority of India. Well, this topic caters to GS paper 2, that is important government interventions, and your prelims examination. Well, the Eat Right movement, as the name goes, you have to eat properly. The Eat Right movement started by FSSAI aims to cut down or reduce the consumption of sugar, salt or oil by 30% in the next 3 years. Let me repeat, it aims to cut down or reduce the consumption of sugar, salt or oil by 30% in the next 3 years. It aims to engage citizens to improve their health and make the right kind of food choices. right? Now, FSSAI has done some important things. It has put some regulatory measures under three pillars, that is, eat safe, eat healthy, and eat sustainably. It says you have to eat safe, you have to eat healthy, you have to eat sustainably. Eat safe, as in do not eat those things that can harm your health. You have to you have to eat healthy things, and also you have to eat sustainably so that the food security for others is not compromised. Now, FSSAI has prescribed a limit for the total polar compounds, TPC, or the total polar compounds are 25% of the cooking oil, and to avoid the harmful effects of the reused cooking oil, right? The total polar compound should be 25% of the cooking oil, and harmful effects have to be avoided. Now, another initiative of FSSAI is the RUCO, reused cooking oil. They use this to produce their own or you can say the biodiesel, or biofuels as such, so that the people don't consume the reused cooking oil that most of the Indian households do. That once the oil becomes used again and again, it starts to develop bad fatty acids in it, that leads to bad health and uh, accumulation of fat in the body, or cholesterol as such. Hence the FSSAI has said that RUCO, we can stop the usage of reused cooking oil, and we can use it to produce biofuels. It is another initiative, and the Eat Right is another initiative. Have a good idea about the Eat Right movement, have a good idea about the total polar compounds, and I think we are clear with this topic. Let us move on to the next one. Well, this topic is about the NPCI, or the National Payments Corporation of India. This NPCI is an important organization because it has been asked several times in your prelims examination, and you can use it as an add-on point in your GS paper 3 answers as well. Let us see what this idea, or this idea behind developing this NPCI is. Now, NPCI is an umbrella organization. It's an umbrella organization for all the retail payments in the country. It has been started by the Reserve Bank of India, or let's say it has been established by the Reserve Bank of India with the Indian Banks Association in the year 2008. It started its operations in the year 2009. This is an umbrella organization for all the retail payments in the country. Okay, so this is the idea of NPCI. The objective of NPCI is to support these two organizations in consolidating the various payment systems, or settlement systems across the country, like retail payment system, or mobile wallets, or standard business processes, etc. Now they help in facilitating affordable payment for the people, and they help in progressing of the digital economy as such. Now, under the Payment Settlement Systems Act of 2007, NPCI has started some important systems. Let's know what are they. The National Financial Switch, the Immediate Payment System. You can also talk about the National Automated Clearance House, or the Clearing House. You can talk about the Aadhaar Enabled Payment System. These are all catering somewhat to the digital technology. Where you have the National Financial Switch to pay for the payments. You have the IMPS, like you can say the mobile wallets. You can see the Clearing House for the checks, and the Aadhaar Enabled Payment System, where you can pay based on your Aadhaar details. The NPCI has also brought forth some products that we use on a daily basis. You have the RuPay card, which is an alternative to the Visa and MasterCard, right? This is the Indian version of the Visa and MasterCard, the debit card, credit card, you can say. Then you have the National Common Mobility Card, also called as the contactless card. If you know, recently this has come up where you have just have to tap the card on the ATM, the swiping machine, where your payment will be done. NPCI has also developed the BHIM app, Bharat Interface Money app, Bharat Interface for Money. It has also developed the UPI, that is the United Payments Interface for the payments, quick payments, like the mobile wallet, so on and so forth. It has also developed the Bharat Bill Payment System, where you can pay the bills through this particular application. Hence, NPCI becomes very, very important. These aspects relating to NPCI also become really important for us. Now, if you talk about NPCI and its relation to other banks, SBI, Punjab National Bank, Canara Bank, Bank of Baroda, Union Bank, HDFC, ICI, all of them have teamed up with NPCI for promotion of it, to help to make sure people are using it and people are making taking the advantage of the kind of things that have been put forth here. I think the idea is clear. Let us move on to the next topic. This is the last topic and caters to the idea of geography. Now, the region of Taiwan has been pretty much in news because how China tries to, you know, place its hegemony on Taiwan. So let us have a clear look about what is the region where it is located. So if you see, this is India, this is China, and this is Taiwan. This is an island nation located very, very close to the Chinese country or the country of China. Now let's go little magnified inside. So if you see, the China and Taiwan are separated by the Taiwan Strait. Towards the southwest, you have the South China Sea. Towards the southeast, you have the Philippine Sea, and in the north, you have the East China Sea. Please remember that Taiwan is bound by these seas. It's an island nation. Taiwan Strait is an important thing that you need to know of. And then there is East China Sea, South China Sea, and there is Philippine Sea. And also note the Tropic of Cancer passes through Taiwan. Well, that's it from today. I hope you have learned many things from this discussion. Please write to us in the comment section about where we can improve and what better we can do for you aspirants. That's it. Until next time. Thank you. Bye bye.